Hello and welcome. I am Scrapperlock, and this is City of Heroes on the Rebirth server. We are with Quintessence last, our level 40 brute, who has 9.5 million XP earned with about 600,000 to go to get to level 41, not 600 million. 33 million influence, and we're on a story arc for Indigo, who sent us to Crimson. Crimson says, thanks for coming, Quintessence last. By now you should know a lot about the basic situation. People who had Melvin Langley kidnapped are still trying to figure out how much he knows. In order to pin that down, they've been going through and trying to hit anyone and everyone who might have talked about his work with them. They also aren't being very subtle about it, indicating that they're either very worried or very angry. Either state doesn't bode well for Melvin's future. Right now, the Knives of Artemis are about to dispose of a woman who used to proofread Melvin's reports for him. I'm going to send you to rescue her. That's pretty normal. After that, though, I want you to go to her office and plant some false copies of Melvin's report. The proofreader and the paperwork are the only really important elements in each operation, respectively. However, if you have to crack some heads on the way, I wouldn't be too upset. It's what we call verisimilitude. Makes things look believable. Alright, so we're going to be fighting the knives. We're still going to keep our missions on +2 times 1 just because the knives can be extremely frustrating to fight when there are multiples because of the caltrops. It's not going to kill you, but it just makes it so that like after the battle's over, it takes forever to walk out of the caltrops. You'll see some of it even with these smaller groups, and that'll show you what I mean. But for larger groups, it's even more objectionable, and there's really to me, there's no point to making it harder if it also makes it annoying. So we're not going to do that. So as we go, I'd like to have another conversation about role-playing games, and this one is again sort of role-playing game non-specific. It could be City of Heroes we're talking about, and the discussion came up in Dungeons and Dragons, of course, as many of these do on one of the forums I read, but it could be Champions, it could be Call of Cthulhu, it could be Stars Without Number, it could be just about anything. And this is a case where there's a group playing, and at the beginning of the session 0 or whatever, they decided on roles, and the one player said, "I'll play the tank." Now, in City of Heroes, the tanker is called a tanker, but brutes can tank and scrappers can off tank, and the controllers, if you have them on the battlefield, then you don't need as many tanking people and that sort of thing. But tanking it's one of the accepted roles for characters, right? The tank, the DPS character, the controller, and the healer, right? And sometimes the groups will recognize the need for an off tank, who's often also the DPS dealer. And so it was a group of people, and one person agreed to be the tank, and one person agreed to be sort of the off-tank DPS, and it was the off-tank DPS who was complaining about this. And one person agreed to be the healer, and one person agreed to be the blasting, DPSer, and one person agreed to be the controller, what have you. And they were all having fun, or thought they were. But the guy who decided to be the tank, and he was a monk, I believe, so he was a tanking monk, after several sessions wrote to the group and said, I want this character out. Like, we can kill her off or whatever, I can just have her leave, but I'm not having fun tanking, and I want to play a DPS character. Right? And the person who had been the off-tank DPS said, well, like, my character can't really tank. It wasn't built for that. And I didn't sign up to tank, and I don't want to tank. And shouldn't this guy be forced to tank? That's what he agreed to do. And so, what most of us said, of course, in response to this in D&D, and I would say it in response in City of Heroes as well, because I had lots of experience with this even back in the day before there were sets, you don't have to have a tank. Let him play the character he wants. So I think the first comment here is, don't get locked into the archetype descriptions that, say, City of Heroes has, and then believe that it's that you have to have all of the archetypes, right? You've got to have one tank, one scrapper, one blaster, one controller, one defender, or you can't play the game. That's simply not true. And you can see these guys are almost unhittable. If we look at our 2-hit, we have 56% chance with our 7% buff going, so we've got a base 43. Or, well, a 2-hit of 43. That means with my accuracy, so Midnight Grasp, well, let's use Midnight Grasp at 91%. So I don't know how come some of them had such lower chances to hit. Smite had a 56% chance. Shadow Punch had a 56% chance. Shadow Maul had a 43, right? So 43% chance without any buffs. If we look at the math on this, is 75% chance base to hit. And Shadow Maul has a 1.6 accuracy. And we also get an extra 7%. So it's got about a 1.7 accuracy. I think I've calculated this before, right? With 1.7 of what gets you to a 43% to hit from a 75. You know what I mean? And so the 75 must have been dropped down to about a 25. Maybe it... Yeah, about a 25, because then about 1.7 times 25 would get us to around 40-ish, so 27, something like that. So these ladies have about a 48 defense, which again is dramatically higher than mine, and higher than any reflex scrapper could get without massive sets. So now that was a lieutenant. These won't be quite as bad. Let's go ahead and do a soul drain on this and buff ourselves up. And now you'll see how annoying the caltrops can be, but there are only 3 of these in here, so they can only stack it 3 times. Not too bad. But if you try to back out, it slows you down, right? And then you're taking the damage while you're backing out. They're quite effective, caltrops, as a tool to control the battlefield a little bit, do some damage, and especially stop enemies from running away. You can see I'm still taking all this damage and still going very slowly, and it also suppresses jump. Alright, so let's go back to our conversation. So, the first thing is, just because these archetypes exist in City of Heroes doesn't mean you have to have one of each archetype on your team. And lots of people have had fun just playing a team of blasters, playing a team of tanks, playing a team of scrappers. Is it going to play the same way as if you have one of each archetype? No. It's not going to play the same way, but it's certainly doable. You don't have to have one of every archetype. And I think players sometimes lock themselves into thinking that they need it. And certainly in D&D, you don't have to have a tank. We don't realistically have a single tank character in my D&D group. The fighter rogue is, because he's a rogue, he's wearing light armor, so his AC isn't very high, but he has a lot of hit points. Then we have an Eldritch Knight. She's got some AC, but not as many hit points as the fighter rogue, because he's a dwarf and he's got a higher constitution. Then we have a Ranger, and the Ranger's pet, because she's a Beastmaster, and none of them can, like, full tank. It's basically, like, 4 off-tanks in the group who also do good DPS, and then we have a couple of pure spellcasters. And they're fine. I mean, like, literally, only one of them has ever had to make a death saving throw ever in the entire campaign, and we're like 28 sessions in. And some of the battles have been pretty tough. They've survived without a tank. So you don't have to have a tank, right? So the first answer to this, if the guy doesn't want to play a tank, you shouldn't feel like you have to have a tank and he needs to play one. He doesn't need to. But the other comment I would make, and this is very important, is you can't make people have fun the way you want them to have fun. So just because you want there to be a tank doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be fun for me to play the tank. And if I'm not having fun playing the tank, you telling me you want me to do it isn't going to make me have fun. And so, and you might wonder, why did I do the soul drain there? I saw that there were stars coming from the side, and I knew that there was an invisible merc here, and I wanted to make her show up. And damaging her made her show up. So you can't make players play what you want them to play. You see, it's just never going to work because the whole point of this is to have fun, right? And if you're not having fun, you're not going to play. And so what I tried to explain to this person who was very upset is, look, you can, complain all you want to this guy, but in the end, if he's not having fun playing a tank, you're not going to get any mileage out of trying to force him to play a tank because he's not going to enjoy it and he's going to stop playing, right? And then you're not only aren't you going to have a tank, but you're not going to have whatever else his character might bring to the table if he made up a DPS character or a mage or whatever, right? So as hard as it may be to play with no tank, it's going to be even harder to play without him. And if your party of 5 goes down to party of 4, it's going to be a lot harder than it would be to fight whatever it is without a tank in a group of 5, right? The more, people on your side, the easier it is, and there's simply no question about that. So, so I guess my comment here is, don't try to make other people play characters they don't want to play, do things they don't want to do in the game to support what you want. Because if they're not having fun, they're just going to stop, and what you wanted isn't going to happen anyway. Right? I've talked a lot from the DM side about things, but as a dungeon master, you have to realize that, yes, you have to please yourself and do stories you like and stories you enjoy, but if you don't please the players, they're just going to say, I don't want to play anymore. Right? They're just going to leave. Matt Colville has a quote, no D&D is better than bad D&D, right? And I would say, more broadly than that, not playing an RPG is better than not having fun playing an RPG, right? If you may as well not play if you aren't having fun. And so I'd rather not play at all than not have fun. Let's take a look at this, right? I cut this down from, gosh, I tried to fight the Knives of Artemis. It's not, I didn't provide you guys with the video, but I tried to fight them at ×3. I was able to do it, but it was miserable because of all the stupid caltrops, right? 1 or 2 of them coming down isn't so bad, but they stack, right? They stack, and that just makes you slower and slower and slower and slower, and you can't even get out of it, and you're being surrounded, and more caltrops are coming down, and it's just so annoying, right? And I wasn't having any fun. So I would argue not playing City of Heroes is better than trying to play City of Heroes while you're not having any fun. So I cut it down to ×2, and I tried it, and it was still not really fun. So I cut it down to ×1, and it's fine. I'm enjoying it again, and that's great. So no City of Heroes is better than bad City of Heroes, right? And, playing it a little too easy is better than playing it appropriately challenging but super annoying, which is what it was, right? So, yeah, I mean, you have to realize people play these games for enjoyment and for fun. And if somebody's not having fun playing the tank, don't try to make them play the tank. Let them play what they want. And by the way, if you don't want to play the tank, don't feel like you have to take it on the chin and be the tank for everybody else. Play what you want, because again, if you aren't having fun, the game can't last for you, right? It's not going to. You're going to stop. You're not going to enjoy it, and you're going to eventually realize that not playing at all is more fun than playing. And if not playing is more fun than playing, then you aren't going to play, right? Because why would you? Let's call Indigo. Oh, no, what do we have to do? Oh, we have to do another... We have to take the papers to Crimson, right. So let's go to Peregrine Island. And then he's going to send us on the mission to plant the false files. Yeah, so always remember the name of the game is fun. The whole reason we're here is to enjoy ourselves. If you're doing something you're not enjoying yourself doing, then stop doing that and try to find a way to enjoy yourself. And, if you're not having fun playing the game, you shouldn't play it, right? It's the whole purpose is to have fun. Okay. He says, did you read this Quintessence last? I didn't ask you to. If you did, you probably shouldn't have. There's names in here that could be a lot of trouble for a person to even know. If you didn't, then you're not going to have a chance to. This piece of a report has places to go and people who need to see it. Now that the proofreader is safe and unharmed, the next step is to convince our mutual friends that they have no reason to go after her in the first place. So I'm going to give you an edited version of this paper and have you place it in her office. Like I told you before, that's the only important part. If there are any enemy operatives on site, they aren't your concern unless you decide to make them so. Are we clear? If you have been curious, Quintessence Slash, you might be starting to learn a lot by now. If not, well, that works too. When Indigo tapped you as a resource, she told you that we might never be able to explain why we asked you to do some of these things. That doesn't necessarily mean that all the clues aren't there. It's just safer if you put them together yourself or ignore them. So, well, the clues are about the mysterious Malta group, right? That the search began when Indigo told us about the Malta group kidnapping Melvin Langley, fearing that Malta were going to start to tie up loose ends, eliminating people Langley had talked to. We went after Thunderhead and so forth, and then we stopped the Malta group from destroying an office where Melvin Langley worked. And the edited piece of his work is from the Might for Right Act in 1967. In that year, 3 drafted African American heroes working in Paragon City protested when they were selected to be by the Might for Right Act. They argued that the act had been used particularly to target poor minority metahumans, as they wouldn't have the resources to fight it in court, and that the act also infringed on their civil rights by targeting them because of their metahuman status. In the end, the Supreme Court overturned the Might for Right Act in a tense 4-3 judgment with 2 abstentions. That is a very interesting little piece of history. Of course, we've heard it before because Silver Phoenix did this, but in case you haven't watched that. So this is all based on this Might for Right Act, and that the government was trying, it's sort of like the Mutant Registration Act in Marvel, that the government was trying to control supers and use them as essentially weapons to enlist them to fight against the Soviet Union. And apparently the Malta group is somehow involved in this. So now what we're going to do is plant the edited evidence. Yes, I think the most important thing to remember about Dungeons & Dragons or Champions or City of Heroes and playing any of these games, they're games, right? And the purpose of any game, the overall purpose, above whatever the stated goal of the game is, right? Whether the goal is like Monopoly to take over all the property and become the richest person on the board, or chess to checkmate the king, or what have you, the goal of any game, above and beyond those specifics, is to have fun. And that's true of a role-playing game as well. And so if we're having fun doing this, then this is the purpose of the game, and that's what we should be doing. If we're not having fun, then we shouldn't play it. And there are lots of video games and online games that I've been like, oh, this isn't any fun, I'm going to stop. I mentioned some episodes ago that I bought very low price full trilogy of the most recent 3 versions of the game Tomb Raider, and I started playing the first one, which is kind of like the origin of Lara Croft, and I think it's what the most recent movie with Alicia Vikander was about. Haven't seen that movie. And I thought the story, actually, of Tomb Raider was kind of cool, and I liked the Lara Croft character, at least what I saw of it. But I wasn't really having a lot of fun playing the game. There were parts that were great, but there were parts that I just didn't like. And one of them were these, like, I don't know what you want to call them, sort of like cutscene challenges, where you're doing things like being thrown down a ravine, and you have to, like, use the controller to, like, slide out of the way of sharp objects, and if you don't do the pattern exactly right, then you get impaled by a sharp object, and you got to start at the beginning and go do it over again, right? And the pattern is very hard to discern as you first go through. So basically, unless you get really lucky, or you're way better at a game like that than I am, you're going to die over and over again. The first time you have to juke to the left. You're not going to realize it fast enough, and you're going to die, and then you're going to have to sort of repeat it until you can juke to the left and miss the first obstacle, and then you'll get impaled by the second obstacle on the right, and then you've got to go through and start over again and get past the left obstacle, and then go to the right obstacle, and go past that, and then if you screw the third one up, then you've got to start all the way back at the beginning. And there were a couple of these that I must have done 20 or 30 times because I'm just not that good at the reflexes, and it wasn't immediately obvious, and I'm just waiting for Soul Drain to recharge so we can do an AoE to these guys. And the reason for that is that as soon as they see me, they will try to summon, and I'm figuring that the Soul Drain might knock them out of the summon, and it is an AoE. Now, he's probably going to summon, but at least I can stop these two if I go in between them and try to do a Soul Drain. I think that'll work. No, I missed him, so it didn't work. Oh well. So yeah, I just found that having to keep repeating these sort of cutscenes over and over and over again until I got them right was not fun. Right? I spent like 20 minutes on the one, and I was like, I can't. And I just gave up. Whichever was the last one I came to, I was like, I can't do it anymore. And I had done a bunch. I mean, I was like, about 50% of the way through the game, I think. And it just wasn't fun. And there was another challenge with like gunners and stuff, and again, it was one of these things where, and this was super annoying. This happened a couple of times where they kind of throw a cutscene in the middle of an action scene, so you're busy fighting, and then all of a sudden everything goes slow-mo. I missed him again. Everything goes slow-mo, and you can't use the normal controls, and then if you survive that, it goes back to normal again. And I had a lot of trouble with that. And as you guys know, it's not necessarily things being hard that are a problem for me, it's things that I find annoying, and I found that really annoying and not fun. And so I just said, okay, well, clearly the challenges that they've picked aren't enjoyable to me, and I just stopped playing it. So I never played the second or the third game. I bought them, right? I bought them all for the price of like one game. So, and I played part of one of the games. So like, okay, whatever. I got enough hours out of it that I don't feel like I completely wasted my money. But I keep clicking this, and it's not punching him. That's really annoying. That's the third time that's happened. So, yeah, I didn't find it fun, so I stopped playing it. And, again, this is the same point if you're talking about, like a role-playing game, and you've got somebody who's being, asked by the group to play a tank even though they don't want to tank, or guys trying to convince somebody to DM when they really don't want to. Like my best friend, every once in a while I ask him, you in the mood to DM yet? And he's like, no. I don't push him on it. Right? Oh, come on, DM for a while. I'm getting tired. You could DM. No. You don't want the person to be somebody who's saying, I really don't want to DM. I'd rather not DM. Oh, okay, I'll do it. That's not what you want. Right? You want somebody who's like, yeah, guys, I have a cool idea. I'm dying to DM. Please let me DM. Right? Because that person has volunteered to do it, and that means they want to do it, and they're having fun doing it. As much work as DMing is, I still also find it fun. We played our Roman game last night, the Shrine of the Kuatoa, and the players finally got up to the shrine. I also got to roleplay the Sverf Nibelin NPCs. I'm so super glad that I put them in. It was really fun. And I used a Matt Colville voice. I'm not a voice actor, and I don't try to do accents because I'm horrible at accents. But he has this voice that he uses specifically for Dragonborn, and he actually talked about it in one of his videos. He has this voice he uses for Dragonborn that's sort of this halting voice. He feels like just biologically the Dragonborn might talk this way, and so they talk like this, right? And so I'm not going to keep doing it, but I did that for the Deep Gnome voices, and I think I really liked that the gnome character, who's usually the quietest in the roleplay because she's new, and sometimes the other players kind of, just take take what's going on and run with it, and they don't stop to realize that they're not, they don't turn to her and say, "What do you think?" So, and sometimes I try to get her included um, into the into the session because of that. She's also just tends to be a quiet person, kind of like me. I mean, I'm fairly quiet too, but her character had to do all the talking because nobody else understood Gnomish, and the gnomes did not understand Common, or they tried Dwarvish. They didn't understand those. They only understood Gnome, and so she was the only one who could talk to them, and so she had to do all that. She had to take the lead for like half an hour in roleplay, and I think she enjoyed it, and I enjoyed seeing her do it, and so it was super fun to play this for Nebulans, and they told the players, a lot about what was about the dangers of the Kuo-toa. They warned them that they could see invisible things. Um, when the characters said they were going to go forward, they said, "Well, how do you intend to, get in there? There are hundreds of them." And they said, "Well, we can sneak around." And they're like, "Well, what do you mean?" And they showed that they had some magic, like illusion magic and stuff, which the gnomes are very familiar with. And our target is just up ahead. And then they said, "Well, you'd better be aware. They can sense pressure like fish can." And there's a boss, so we're definitely going to fight him. They said they can sense pressure like fish can, and therefore they can see invisible things, so you'd better be careful. And so the players are like, "Oh crap!" And so they rested among the gnomes, a short rest, and then they sent their familiars in, and they did a lot of scouting around to the best they could, and they started, coming up with a plan. And the whole time, I was enjoying it. I was like covering my mouth because I was trying not to smile, because as a GM, you want to keep a good poker face. And I wasn't not like I was laughing at them. I was just smiling with enjoyment at how they were reacting to this adventure that Gary Gygax wrote all those years ago, and that they seemed to really be enjoying it, and really chewing on the solution to like how to solve this dungeon. Right, I have no idea what they were going to do, and they came up with several ideas, like the sorcerer can cast Dimension Door, and he was like, maybe we can teleport in, get the treasure, and teleport out. But I just luckily made this decision. Two of the treasure chests they were looking for were in one place, and one was in another, and they saw where they were, but they also recognized we can't get to both of them in a single. Like, he's like, I can only teleport twice, in and out, so I can't teleport like 4 times. It's not going to work. And so what do we do? And so they were thinking about it and chewing on it, and they chewed on it a little bit too long. And I followed Matt Koval's advice: orcs attack. And in that advice, and we'll talk to Indigo briefly in a minute, he said, the players can get stuck with what I call analysis paralysis, right? They have 3 or 4 possible options, and they are going round and round in circles, and they're not really making any progress on deciding which option to do. And so he said, when they get stuck like that, throw a random monster encounter at them. Attack them with some orcs. And he doesn't mean actual orcs, just have somebody attack them. And have a combat encounter, and it like just knocks them out of the analysis paralysis. Now, the combat encounter that I threw at them was just some Kuo-toa started coming down the hallway, and my one friend was like, "Oh, good, this is perfect." Now, I didn't do it for this reason, but he said this is perfect because they didn't know how powerful these guys were, and he said we can measure ourselves against them and see what they do. And they found out they were pretty easy. So now they're talking about maybe just going in guns blazing and fireballing a bunch of them. If they do that, there might be a total party kill. But these guys aren't super strong, and if they're smart about the way they go about attacking, they might be able to not necessarily kill everybody, but go in, quickly grab the chests, fend off the enemies long enough, and get the heck out. So we'll see. They also talked about going to get the Roman army at the outpost in Turris and bringing them. And what they don't know is if the army comes, a contingent of priests and a group of cleric druids from the Circle of the Moon will also come, and the Sverfnebeln will show up with a detachment. And I've got some Stronghold and Followers units for both the Kuo-toa and for that, and we're going to have like a big giant battle, and I'll have them fight the priest prince leader in combat while they run the Roman units and I run the bad guy units, and we're going to have like a little war down there in the temple. But they haven't decided to do that yet. They're pretty much trying to do it on their own. And so we'll see. They don't know that I have the strongholds and followers thing prepped. I didn't mention any of that to them. I thought about saying, well, if you guys want to do that, I've got strongholds and followers prepped to do this. But I thought, no, I don't. I don't want to influence their decision. And so I was mostly sitting there listening to them for the vast majority of the night. I played the gnome, and other than that, I ran a battle at the beginning with crocodiles that took about a half hour, and a battle at the end that took a half hour, and maybe 20 minutes of role playing the gnome, and the other like 2 hours was me just sitting there listening to them, watching them role play. That was super fun for me. Right? I enjoyed it. They did a great job, and I think they all had fun. It's fun watching your players have fun. So, as long as you're having fun, that's the point of the game, and you keep playing. But if you're miserable, you don't want to keep playing. So, don't try to force somebody to be a game master for you. Don't try to force yourself to be a game master when you don't want to. Don't try to force somebody to play a character type they don't want to play, and you shouldn't try to force yourself to play a character type you don't like. Have I ever played a blaster? Nope. I've tried it a few times. I can't get him out of the teens. I don't like the way blasters play. I don't like the way controllers play. You're never going to see a Let's Play. I'm not going to force myself to do it. The types of characters you've seen me play, Scrapper, Stalker, Tanker, Brute, Mastermind, those are the ones I enjoy. The other one I haven't done yet is Dominator, and I might like Corruptor. Haven't tried that yet. But I know for a fact, not a fan of Defender, Controller, and Blaster, which is why I never got any of them even to level 20 ever during live, and I've not even tried to play any of them in the reboot of this game when it came back. So, know what you like. This is back to the old idea of the sweet spot. Know your sweet spot, play in your sweet spot. When you're playing in your sweet spot, a role-playing game is absolute joy. When you're playing way out of your sweet spot in a place that you don't like, it's terrible. So the way to enjoy things is find your sweet spot and help other people find theirs, and don't try to ask somebody to play the game not in their sweet spot. So let's talk to Indigo, and then we will finish up for this episode. She says, you did really well, Quintessence Lass. I have it from excellent resources that our friends are starting to get nicely confused about what Melvin Langley may or may not have found out. Through the same sources, I also know that Melvin's still alive. Things may be looking up. We just have to keep them disoriented. And we are going to stop there. I hope you guys enjoyed. Until next time, I am Scrapperlock, and this is City of Heroes on the Rebirth server.